This is the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. The Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. With Stuart Cameron and Dale Clancy.
Yes, welcome to the 10th edition of the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast, and Garnock from National 4 march on with their 100% record, including try-bonus points, with another victory at the weekend, making it 7 out of 7 for them. And as far as unbeaten teams across the 5 divisions are concerned, well, we're down to just 3 now. Allenglen's losing at the weekend, so Garnock, Ayr and Orkney, the only clubs from the 50 in the National Leagues who haven't yet tasted defeat. Well, join me, as always, is Dale Clancy, and in today's programme we're going to dissect all that happened last weekend and also preview this Saturday's games. And weather-wise, it's looking reasonably okay. We don't expect any matches to be called off. So let's start with the Premiership, and it was full of shocks and surprises, starting with Edinburgh Accies 31, Curry 19, and Curry were actually down 31-5 at one point. And you have to say, Derby or no Derby, that is a surprising result in terms of the manner that Curry were dismantled.
Yeah, Curry have started the season pretty well, but they've hit a bit of a sticky patch now. You know, obviously defeats against Marr and Hawick, and then again on the road they went to Raeburn Place, a rival of theirs, obviously, in Edinburgh Accies, who, you know, we did say last week, you know, it was one of those games. Edinburgh derbies are difficult to call, but Edinburgh Accies certainly needed to win that to kind of stamp their authority back in that 4th place position in terms of the playoffs. But they've almost blown it wide open now, because there's a few teams that have certainly put their hands up after this weekend. In
fact, a week ago we were talking about the top 3 in a little league of their own, then another 3 in the league of their own. There are 6 teams going for that top 4.
Yeah, you know, in terms of the results this weekend, it has completely blown it away, because it's completely just squeezed the championship. And I think it's good, because we were starting to talk about the league that way, and it then springs a surprise. And I just think that's great in Premiership rugby, amateur rugby, that there's still that intrigue, there's that competition. It's ferocious at the top, and in any day, we've seen there with Edinburgh Accies against Curry, you know, any team can beat another team in this division, and on this occasion it's Edinburgh Accies to pick up a good win.
Well, before we leave Edinburgh Accies and Curry, a mention for Jamie Soule making his 200th appearance for the club, and he's been some servant, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was a really good player. Obviously started his time as a back, very unlike his dad, but he started his time as a back and then moved into the back row, and he's been a great contributor to Edinburgh Accies at the time when he was younger. You know, he was looked at as a real prospect for going on further in the game as a back. So to be able to adapt and move into the back row as well, it just shows you what a talented rugby player that he is. And obviously, you know, to notch up 200 appearances for any club at first team level is phenomenal in this day and age. So yeah, certainly a great accolade for him.
Let's go on to the second result from last week. Glasgow Hawks 27, Heriots Blues 19. Another team in the top half losing out to a Hawks team who are always strong at home, aren't they?
Yeah, Hawks are strong at home. It's another big result, because, and I think it's brilliant listening to the the sound bites from their camp in terms of the way that their club runs, because it is quite unorthodox to what we're used to in the Scottish borders, because they've got little community clubs. So they've not really been able to find the consistency this season, to the point where you're almost looking at them as being in that bottom mini league that we were starting to compose ourselves, and probably a little bit naive of us, but we've kind of chunked them in the bottom because they weren't having that consistency. Heriots have been scoring loads of tries, been playing really well, but Glasgow Hawks have been able to get a good victory and obviously limit the amount of points that Heriots were able to rack up.
Hawick 36, Selkirk 8. Now on paper that looks like a comfortable win for Hawick, but in fact nothing could be further from the truth, because they scored 4 tries in the last 12 minutes or so. In fact, it was 7-3 at half-time, very low scoring.
Rugby's an 8-minute game, so you know the fact that on paper I look at that 36-8, it's an 8-minute game, and I think Hawick obviously shown that they've got a stronger squad, they've got more depth, they've got more match winners in that team. And yes, Selkirk will be able to get up to the occasion and the Border Derby for a period of time. It just shows the gulf in class between those two sides. And I get what you're saying. You know, 4 tries in the last period of the game, but it's still a game. And you know, if Selkirk were in the lead for a certain period of time of that fixture, it's again shown the fact that they can't see out games. You know, they did it against Musselburgh. They've been in the fight against Hawick and not been able to get anything from it. And it goes to form. We did say that. I thought it would be a comfortable Hawick victory, and on paper or not, it certainly looks that way.
So Selkirk, when they played Edinburgh Accies, they were down 20-0 at half-time, and then they won the second half, so they did the complete opposite this time.
Yeah, but I just think it's, again, the consistency. It's a team that have went from being mid-table a couple of seasons ago to being almost nailed on for being in the top 4. then fallen away slightly. You know, at the end, that defeat against Musselburgh last season, their home form was abysmal, so they're not able to get that continuity, and it's a shame, because I think, you know, there's so many really, really good rugby players in that Selkirk side as well. It's just difficult when you've not got a huge pool of players to pick from. You know, sometimes those games you can compete for 60, 65, 70 minutes, but quality will always come out on top more often than not, and I think it did show on Saturday with Hawick being able to stretch away in the final periods.
Kelso 30, Jedforest 21 was the other border derby, a home win, and the first time, of course, since 1999 that the two had met in the Premiership, because obviously Kelso's been out the Premiership for a long time.
Yeah, I was 10. What age were you, Stuart?
A bit more than that.
Okay, plus that. Again, we said last week that it was one of those games that, especially in the Scottish borders, you know, we watched Kelso come up from National 1, and that was a huge fixture because, as you say, Kelso haven't been in the top table of Scottish rugby for a long, long time, and it was even just looking at the images, you know, reading bits about the match report and whatnot, but looking at the images, there was some really, really brilliant images for Scottish Club Rugby. The stand was packed, and obviously, you know, it was covered as well by us, and the pictures coming back from Pointer Park was just great. It was like a bit of a throwback in terms of what I remember being young, being interested in rugby, what rugby was like. Obviously, it's kind of diluted slightly since then, but you know, it's great to see there's still an appetite for a good border derby down at Poynter.
Jed unlucky not to get 2 bonus points. They were really going for that fourth try at the end. In fact, they won the second half. And Kelso will be disappointed equally that they scored 3 tries in the first half, and not for the first time this season haven't been able to get that fourth. Although there were a couple of opportunities which didn't go their way, referee decisions, etc. I mean, there was one which again could have given them an extra point, but it didn't.
Yeah, I think I would say they'll maybe just be a little bit disappointed, but they'll be really glad to pick up the win, because that is a difficult game to judge and prepare for after the performance that Jed put in against Marr the weekend before. So, you know, how do you fix your mind? You don't know what you're going to expect from that Jed side now, because yes, they were defeated against Marr, but it was almost an upward curve. They've almost continued that, but they've played a side they could potentially bring back down into a bit of a relegation battle. The opportunities passed them by, so I don't think Kelso will be too disheartened about coughing up 1 point.
And they're 17 points clear of Jed now.
Yeah, exactly. I think 17 points is a big deficit to try and overturn in a league campaign, and it's even more so if you've not got off to the most promising of starts. So it's going to be difficult, but again, we've got to remember, Jed have got to play a lot of these sides at home, and they're a really strong side at home, and they've shown that they've got the appetite when they've got a really strong squad out there that compete with some of the best in the league.
And the other match was extraordinary as well. Marr 28, Musselburgh 36. Musselburgh hinted that this was not a banker for Marr when they nearly won at Hawick, of course, at Mansfield Park. And Musselburgh survived a late comeback, but they were really home and dry with a try bonus. That's 8 bonus points for them now in 9 games. And they're seriously going for that playoff spot now. Yeah,
they definitely are. And it's been a complete turnaround. And I'm not scared to admit that I remember when we played Musselburgh years ago, and we went to Stony Hill, we got our pants pulled down, and it was ridiculous, and you then have a bit of a grudge against a side for the rest of your life, but they're starting to be a little bit of a kind of guilty pleasure at the moment. Because,
let it go.
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to. But they're certainly, you know, being a bit of a guilty pleasure because of the points and the performances, a little bit of the heart and the desire that you see. I was able to catch the end of that Selkirk Musselburgh game at Philippock a few weeks ago, and I just think that the character that Musselburgh showed, you know, it's amateur rugby at the end of the day, but to see them celebrating a last minute victory, you know, just beating a near rival was a huge thing in the context of the last 4 or 5 weeks. Has been a huge victory for them as well. So, you know, Musselburgh are certainly meriting being in the conversation for a playoff position, and you know, few would argue against it at this stage of the season that they're not one of the favourites to grab one of them.
Well, let's have a look at the Premiership then, and Hawick go to the top because of those results. They've won 8 from 9, they're on 37 points. Marr in second place, down 1, they're on 36. Enbracky's into third place, 29 for them. Musselburgh coming up now, even with a minus 32 points difference, are in fourth place, also on 29. Curry, with a game in hand, are in 5th with 27. Heriots Blues in 6th now with 26. Glasgow Hawks have 21 in 7th. Kelso 20 in 8th spot. Selkirk 9th on 13. And Jedforest in last place, still without a win, and only 3 points in that column. So Curry and Hawks a game in hand, but they certainly need to make that count, because after last weekend's results, there could be many twists yet as we go into the second half of the season.
Yeah, a lot of those teams there know what they're playing for come the turn, but you say there about Curry and Hawks, it's another big game because Curry now have suffered 3 defeats against near rivals. Hawks are trying to claw themselves back up towards that table, and you just hear the points tally there, and we've almost cut away now those 2 teams at the top. But again, I'm thinking I'm probably a little bit naive with that as well, because Musselburgh had a great victory on the road at Marr. Are they now in a little bit of a sugary peg? Or Hawick now the clear favourites for this league? And it's a really interesting league. There's been 9 games for most of the teams. There's been a lot of twists and turns, and I don't expect that to finish for the remaining 9. And the playoffs as well, Stuart.
Oh, don't talk to me about playoffs. Mind you, it is quite exciting at the moment seeing who's going to make the top 4, but I still don't believe in them. Anyway, this week, let's move on. This week we should get another full programme in the Premiership, and don't forget, with the clocks gone back now, we're now into mainly 2 p.m. kick-offs for the league, except for those teams with floodlights, which includes all the border sides in the Premiership and National 1 when they play at home. So we start with Curry against Selkirk. Kelso, Jed and Selkirk all find it hard to play at Millennium Park. Is that going to continue on Saturday? Let's hear from head coach at Selkirk, Sesh Henderson.
We were unlucky last Saturday. We played for an hour and we really, when we frustrated Hawick, we played some good rugby, scored a good try, got ourselves back in the game after, it was a pretty scrappy first half. We rode our luck a little bit. Hawick are a good side, but they made a couple of mistakes that maybe they could have scored from. But however, 7-3 at half time. After half time, we got into the game and we scored a try, and we just got sniffed ourselves in the lead. All we need to do is stick to what we talked about at half time. Get into that last quarter, not too far behind the scoreboard, and we were in the game. Stay in the game, stay in the fight, and we did. However, we got to the last 20 and we ended up with getting 2 yellows quite close to each other. Now, Hawick are a very good side. When they get into their attacking shape, it's hard to stop them. And it was only the last 5 to 8 minutes they actually scored 2 or 3 late tries to take the game away from us and got themselves a bonus point, and they took their chances and deserved it. So 2 yellows, a couple of really poor decisions by us allowed them back into the game. So a bit disappointed, but really pleased with the work ethic of the boys. And they realise now if when you frustrate these sort of teams, then we're always in the game, and there's always got that opportunity to score as well. Quickly bounce onto this week. It's got another tough game away from home at Curry. Once we've analysed the previous week, then we move forward quickly next week, and the guys are excited about this week. Different type of team. Curry play a bit more open. We'll go up to Edinburgh with confidence. If we get it right, we're going to win the next couple of games. It doesn't matter who's in front of us, and that's our mindset. We go to every game now and put that ultimate performance in over 80 minutes, and we will get wins, whether it's home or away. And that's what we've been working on. That's what we're excited about, and we'll just take that mindset forward into this week's game.
Sesh Henderson, a Curry bounce back, or will the Accies result give Selkirk a little bit of hope?
I think looking at it, my gut kind of tells me, which is ever expanding now, but my gut tells me that it's going to be a home win. But listening to Sesh Henderson there, he's obviously confident his side have made strides against Hawick, and I do agree with him in elements of that. Is the fact that they were competing and feel at times they perhaps had control and then lose control of the game, but they still ended up on the end of a really heavy defeat. And you do wonder where Curry go back to their home paddock. They feel relatively comfortable at Millennium. They've got to have the reaction now. We've seen a lot of teams out this season having to put themselves in a position, or they've put themselves in a position where they have to react. Curry are now in that position, probably more so than anybody else. Hawick had to react after the defeat against Marr. Curry then have been asked to react against multiple defeats. This is, 3 big defeats. So going at home against Selkirk, I think that it's going to be a Curry backlash.
In Brackies versus Jedforest. Jed still looking for that elusive win. Accies getting that excellent result last Saturday. Let's hear from Jed's David Grieve.
So on Saturday we were down at Kelso, and to be honest it was a bitterly disappointing result for us. First half we just wasn't good enough. We were flat. We looked heavy-legged, we had no energy. It was like a complete opposite for the week before. I'm not sure what was wrong with us, so we'll maybe have to speak to the boys about their preparation. But it wasn't good enough. To be fair to Kelso, they were really clinical. They took their chances, and I thought their game management was really good as well for their halfbacks. got them in the right areas, and they played really well first half. Second half, we kind of spoke at half time about what was going wrong, and pretty much everything the players said they were going to do, they went out and did it in the second half, and much better defensively. We didn't concede any tries second half. I think we actually won the second half. You were even down to 30 men at one point and we still didn't concede any tries, so it just shows we can do it when the attitude's right. We kind of left ourselves with too much to do it for the first half. I think we got 3 tries and we went for the 4th try right at the end, but we just came up just short. It was really disappointing, but this week we've got Edinburgh Accies away, which it doesn't get any easier. It's a really tough place to play, but we just have to go up there looking for points, any sort of points. We just have to have that mindset. That's what we're doing this second half of this season, is points. 1 point, 2 point, 4, 5, anything. And just going into the second half of this season, we have left ourselves out in decline, but we've got 5 home games, so that's maybe the one positive where we could maybe really target the home games. We just have to see what happens.
David Grieve, one of the coaches on the Jedforest team. We've seen against Marr, we've seen against Kelso for certainly the second half that there are improvements happening at Jed.
Yeah, there are improvements. It's probably taken a bit of time for it to really start to develop. And I just remember all the way back at the start, I think Jed were one of the teams that were, bemoaning a really poor pre-season as well. But we think about those home games. They've got Hawks at home, and I was looking a few weeks ago and looking at the fixtures, thinking, where is this win coming from? But there has been a lot of strides, a lot of improvement, and you then start to look at that Hawks game at home. You start to look at Selkirk at home. Kelso have to go to Riverside. Realistically, there could be 12 points in that. There could be 15 points, So that's what they do need to target, is those home games, to try and get themselves back into a position where they can fight for their lives and scrap for any sort of point that they can get on the road as well. But we have to remember the other teams are also going to be picking up points and winning as well for the duration of the season. But I think Jed are aware of what the task in hand is. It's just making sure those little small victories that you have, winning a second half and not conceding, an improvement in defence, and obviously the improvement in attack, that carries on to the next game. And that's exactly what they'll be hoping against Edinburgh Accies this weekend.
A very tough ask for both Selkirk at Curry and Jed at Edinburgh Accies, of course. Winning in Edinburgh is going to be very, very difficult, but an opportunity for both of them to pick up points on each other.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there'll be much movement in terms of their points tally this weekend. It might be that one of the teams does pick up a try bonus, but I just think that the teams at home are in different situations at the moment. Edinburgh Accies will be really confident after beating Curry last weekend, and there'll be a reaction from Curry. So you're right, Stuart, it's going to be a big ask for them to escape with anything, but anything I think for either side will be a bonus, because those two teams at the moment, Jedforest and Selkirk, and I said it at the beginning of the podcast, there was going to be 2 border teams down there, I felt, and they were the 2 teams that I believed were going to be at the foot of the table. So Jed has an opportunity to try and get back to Selkirk, but equally they'll be looking to try and steer away.
Next one, Glasgow Hawks against Hawick, our featured live commentary game on Rugby Radio with a 2 o'clock kick-off. Don't forget, of course, we're on air for an extra 60 minutes throughout the dark months, starting at 1:30, and we can hear the thoughts of both head coaches now, Matty Douglas of Hawick, and first the Hawks chief, that's Andy Hill.
It was another interesting week in the Scottish Premiership. For us, obviously, our big target last week was to go away and beat Heriots and come away with a try bonus and try and make sure that Heriots came away with nothing. That was our goals that we set out at the start of the game, and I believe that, given our history against Heriots, it's something that we could go away and do. It's just a team that we seem to play well against for whatever reason, I don't know. And we managed to obviously come away with that result. It's just a hard one to take when at the end of the whistle you check and you see the results across the league, and it's great because it shows you how competitive the league is, but we were obviously hoping that Curry would go away and do a job against Accies, and that Marr would beat Musselburgh. But credit to both those teams that that they've went away and managed to get 2 great wins, and that kept them above ourselves, because we felt that if we won those games, then it put a bit of pressure on us for that Curry game when it comes round to it, that if we win that game, then move into probably around about the 4th position, given our points difference against the likes of Heriots, who would have been probably just in that 4th position still. However, that's just the changing picture every week of the Premiership, which has been great to see. So again, it's almost at the halfway stage for ourselves. This will be our halfway stage because obviously we've got that game in hand against Curry, so we're back round to play against Hawick. We know how massive that task is going to be. We went down to Mansfield at the start of the season, and as much as we kind of rallied towards the end, it probably glossed over the performance that Hawick had against us. You know, they were physically dominant. They dominated us in terms of, you know, winning their kicking battle, getting in the right areas and taking their opportunities when they were presented to themselves. So it's going to be a massive task. It's a real chance for us to come and see where we are and how far we've come. Obviously, as we mention every single week, loads of changes, but this will allow us to see, you know, how have guys have established and worked towards, you know, some of the things we've put together as a team, but also how they've adapted to the Premiership and the level of the rugby that they've been asked to try and play, because you come up against a team who are obviously top of the league, and within that they've got guys that are just probably, if you were picking a Scottish Club International, they've probably got a bit no far off, close to 10 positions there that might potentially be the best players in their position in the league, when you've got the likes of, you know, Jay Linton playing brilliant every week, Fraser Rennick playing brilliant every week. You see the difference Lee Armstrong's made when he's come back from obviously retirement and coming back in and playing. He made a massive difference off the bench last week, and then align that to the likes of Andrew Mitchell, and then you get the work rate the likes of Dalton Redpath. They're a quality outfit, and so there's no real pressure on us. I don't think anybody's going to expect us to win, whether it's yourselves or the offside line. We just need to go away and focus on what we can try and do and make sure that we're within the battle the entire time and try and get closer to that 80-minute performance that we're hoping for. With a great 40 minutes against Heretics on Saturday, scored some great tries, and again, a bit like the Musselburgh game, you're thinking at some point we're going to kick on and just maintain that level, and teams will struggle to live with us, but for whatever reason, we've not been able to put a finger on it yet. We take our foot off the gas, and that all of a sudden puts pressure on us, and then it's about how we respond to that pressure, because all teams are going to have a point in the game where they get dominance, and it's how we react and how we try and stifle that part of the game and try and regain momentum within that. And we've had some honest conversations around about that this week to how we go about doing that against the likes of White. So we're hoping for a massive shift from all the boys. It was a massive change in terms of defensive effort at the weekend, but we still feel as if there's more levels to go, and we're going to have to go through them when you've got the likes of, you know, Jay and Fraser, who are probably two of the better carriers in the league, along with Sean Muir as well. So we need to go and front up within that to go away and win the physical battle, keep ourselves in the fight, and I believe again, if we're in amongst that with the last 20 minutes to go, we have the quality to score from anywhere, as I've shown in the last few weeks, and that if we have that, we'll take our opportunities and we'll put ourselves in a position to go away and win the game. But it's going to come from the first minute through the first 40 to make sure we're in touching distance and keeping on top of that, because we don't believe we're going to come out here and we'll put 20-30 points on White to get in front of them. It's about trying to make sure when their opportunities come, we take them, whether that's 3 points, whether that's scoring tries. We need to try and keep touching distance, put pressure on White, and try and see if they can hold on it and then manage that as well.
We're now into the second half of the season. We start with a tough trip to Belgrade this weekend, up to Hawks, who are finding some really good form at the minute, playing some good rugby, and for us it's a massive challenge. We've been at home for the last 3 weeks, and it's a huge away game for us to try and keep moving forward and keep kicking on. Last weekend, really happy with the result. I thought the last kind of 15 minutes is where we got our gains, and to score 4 tries in 12 minutes or whatever it was is credit to the players, as Selkirk stayed in the fight. They frustrated us, they pinned us back in our half quite a lot, and they had a good kicking game. So look, the frustration was starting to tell, but there was a little scuffle in that second half that I think probably sparked us into life, and when we got going we played some exceptional rugby, and credit to the players for that, staying in the fight for 80 minutes, and we got a reward at the end of it. So look, we're in a good place, and as I said, we head into this weekend knowing what's needed to win up here. Hawks are a formidable outfit at home. Belgrade is a really, really tough place to go and get any sort of result. So look, we've worked really hard this week and making sure we know exactly what our job is heading here. exactly the way we want to play and what can we do to put Hawks under pressure. But look, they're coming off the back of a couple of good results and they've got some big players in there, so we'll need to be at our best. Squad-wise, again, pretty much a full squad to pick from. One injury last week, Fraser Rennick has broken his thumb, so he'll miss the next month or so, but we welcome Ross Graham back for injury, so he'll put his hand up for selection this week after playing for the Force on last Friday night. So we'll be as full strength as we can be, and again we've got a tough selection ahead of us, but it's now getting into the second half of the season. We need to keep performing week in, week out, as there is only 3 games left after Christmas, so we need to put ourselves in the best possible position coming to the Christmas break, so we know exactly what tasks ahead of us coming into the new year.
So what do you make of this one?
It's nice to hear because he's given a lot of respect to Hawick, and they've earned it. They've justified it over the last couple of seasons. In fact,
he probably talked more about Hawick there than he did Hawks.
Which isn't a bad thing. It was really insightful as well, because he knows that his side are not hoping to streak away for Hawick and then keep them at an arm's length. He just wants to keep them in the fight, and they know what Hawick come with. Like, Hawick are going to be physical. And it was almost like against Selkirk there. Like, they play 80 minutes. They won the Premiership by playing the full duration of the game because they've got the squad depth. Against Selkirk, they took 65 minutes just taking all the feathers out the pillow, and then just that was it. The Selkirk had nothing else left after that. They were completely flat, and Hawick just rolled over them after that. So, Hawks know what the task is. They know what Hawick come with. There's no surprises with Hawick, but it's the respect that he's given them in terms of the names of mentioning the big ball carriers, the difference that Lee Armstrong brings to them in the squad as well. So he certainly knows that they're second favourites, but it's still a difficult game. We've seen Hawick go and play Hawks away from home over the last couple of years and come off second best as well. So this is not a nailed-on victory for Hawick, but it's going to be an intriguing game.
And of course, he mentioned Fraser Rennick. That was before he knew of the fact that Fraser has broken his thumb, won't be playing, but then in comes Ross Graham.
Yeah, I know. I've one hitchhiking injury, and then Matty Douglas said Ross Graham put his hand up, which I think kind of adds insult to injury. But yeah, it's the depth that we talk about. They're players that have played at a really, really good level. Recently coming back from semi-professional rugby as well in our country, back at Hawick. And what a plethora of options that they have at hooker. And we've said before, like obviously Fraser Rennick's a hooker. I think he's been deployed sometimes in the back row as well, just because of his skill set. Ross Graham, likewise. And then you've had Russell Anderson in there as well. They've lost Matty Carrier to going back to Peebles, but they've certainly strengthened that area as well. They've got 3 players that they can call upon in a vital area in this division, like accuracy at the line out, physicality with the ball in hand. They've got 3 players that offer something slightly different, but again, all the same. They're accurate at the line out, they're physical with the ball in hand and get you over the gain line.
It's going to be a good match, I think. I'm looking forward to it. We've done Glasgow Hawks before, playing at Hughenden in the Cup, and of course playing at the Cartha Police Club, or roundabout there, which was very wet.
Yeah, for you, I was inside the box commentating.
Yes, you never stopped reminding me of that.
In my budgie smugglers, I was fine. But that's what I'm alluding to. Hawick went up, and I think that was after the turn of the new year. So that would be the start of 22. They went up in January, and Hawick were in really good form and went up, and they looked second best in all facets of the game. It's a difficult task, and sometimes that plays on your mind as well. But I've said it in the last few weeks, I think Hawick, mentality-wise, are in a different position than they have been over the last few years. I think they've got a lot of confidence over what they've achieved, and rightfully so.
So we'll be at Balgray at last. We'll finally get to see Glasgow Hawks play at their home pitch, and don't forget live commentary coming on that one. We start at 1:30 from now on, all the way through until the clocks go forward again, which seems a long, long way off. 2 o'clock kickoff for that, and then after that game's over, we'll cross over to Poynter Park for Kelso against Musselburgh. Second half commentary with Alan Tate, and also, yes, the Alan Tate and David Ferguson. So that's going to be very interesting. Tasty looking match though. Kelso against Musselburgh, particularly after what we've seen of Musselburgh over the last few weeks. Let's listen to what Kelso Director of Rugby Neil Hinnigan has to say.
We've reached halfway in the season after last week's game against Jed. We obviously got a good win, one that we really needed. As I said last week, both teams really needed the points. We're delighted that we had a good enough performance to get the points, and obviously we didn't give Jed anything either. Bit disappointed we didn't get the bonus point. it was definitely there for the taking. At 27-7 up, we felt we should have kicked on, but credit to Jed. They hung in very well, as you'd expect from a typical border derby, and especially a Jed team playing against Kelso. So full credit to them, and yeah, they were maybe a bit unlucky themselves not to get a point out of the game at least. So we'll take that and move on. We've got a lot to work on. The performance was good in batches. First half overall was good. The second half overall was pretty average. You know, we had 22 missed tackles in the match, and we also gave away 16 penalties. So yeah, away to Curry the week before, when we were under the cosh for most of the game, we actually only gave away 10 penalties. So there's a lot to work on regarding that side of things, and we need to improve our defence, especially if we're going to take on with the informed team in the league at the moment, and especially on the scoring front, Musselburgh. So that's probably our focus this week, and we have been working on it training. We've got a fairly settled side this week from last week, and we do welcome back Cammy Thompson to the bench. He's been out since the second game of the season against Heriot, so it's great to have him back. And Ewan Thompson, after a man of the match performance for Kelso Sharks away to Hawick last week, he regains his place in the squad on the bench. Dropping out is James Glendinning. He just needs a bit of game time, so he's away with Kelso Sharks, and Andrew Sweeney is unavailable. Apart from that, there's no changes, so that's really, really good. Really settled team. We welcome Musselburgh, obviously winning away to Marr. So, but after drawing up there 31-all at the start of the season, you know, it was a game we felt we should have won. You know, obviously looking at some of Musselburgh's results, maybe it was a good 3 points, but yeah, I think there's a sense that this could be another humdinger at Poinder. You know, we're playing pretty well at the moment, and so are they, so should be an intriguing match. We'd also like to give a quick mention to a couple of players who are getting a bit of recognition. Ashton Asante, our tight head prop, and Archie Barber, who's been playing full-back, have been invited along to train with the 20s, Scotland 20s, and I think Ashton might be getting a bit of run for the futures in this Super Six, so it's really good for these players at Kelso to be getting picked, and it's something obviously we want for them. There's 2 or 3 really good youngsters at Kelso at the moment, so it's no surprise to see them getting picked up for honours if they do come from training with them. You never know, they're in the right place when they're there. So that's fantastic news for the club and fantastic news for them. So we wish them all the best on their quest to try and get there in the Scotland 20s if they do.
Hear, hear, and that's what club rugby is all about, developing players for the next step.
Yeah, definitely, and you know, obviously watching a lot of the kind of Super Series stuff as well. There's a lot of Borders talent that are littered throughout, you know, even in the futures as well. And for Ashton, it'll be a tough learning curve if he is in the Forsrope futures, because you know it's been difficult for them. Obviously, a good performance against Ayrshire Bulls at the weekend past, but you know it's been a really tough cycle for these young players to really adapt to that level in physicality of rugby. So you know, obviously things like that need to be kind of ironed out. But I do think that the Borders clubs, probably after COVID as well, I've been really developing a really top level quality player that's been going off to pastures new to kind of move on and go further. So we don't really have that buy-in, I don't think, with the Southern Knights. I don't think there's a lot of players in the region that perhaps are looking to play for them or even go on. They're quite happy to stick with their club teams, which is equally as great. But you know, it's just great to see these young players getting an opportunity in clubs like Kelso. I think over the last few years, I've mentioned it when we've been doing commentary and doing this for the last few years, Stuart, but I just think the culture that Kelso have got at the moment is a really positive one. You know, with people like Neil Hinnigan, these young players and young individuals, they might not go on and represent Scotland, but they'll go on and do really good things in their life, and a lot of that will come back to the lessons they learnt at rugby clubs and the opportunities that were afforded to them by these communities. So, you know, it's great that they're getting some recognition along the way.
Well, like Andy Hill of Hawks talking about Hawick and fully respecting them, you can hear Neil Hinnigan fully respecting Musselburgh and what they've done this season. Remember, they came from nowhere to escape relegation last season, sending GHA down to National 1, and they've continued that form from the end of last season to the beginning of this one.
Yeah, they've been impressive. You know, obviously they've not been beaten in 6 games. They've won 4, they've drawn 2. But you do look at Kelso and they're almost in an equal position. You know, it's 5 games they've not been beaten in this season. So there isn't a lot to call between these two sides. There's a little gap in points because of the points that Musselburgh have been able to put on. But this is a different game than what it was earlier on in the season. This is at Poinder Park, and I just think that, you know, it'll be a slightly different kind of way that this match pans out. The threat is for Kelso is that Musselburgh are dangerous. They can score points in multiple ways now this season. They've got a really strong pack that are able to be accurate at the set piece and set platforms, but also in the backs they've got try scorers. So, you hear Neil Hoonigan there, he's aware of the threats that Musselburgh have, but he's obviously, you can hear him talking about his own players. He knows that he's got players in his own camp that can cause Musselburgh problems. So, in terms of the games this weekend, I think all of them are difficult to call. Maybe apart from the 3 games there, Hawks, Kelso and Marr obviously will come on it shortly, but those games with those teams at home, they're all really tight and difficult games to call.
And so to that Marr versus Heriots Blues game, the Bill McLaren Shield no longer at Fullerton Park. Took some getting down as well from the top of the bar, but it's now in the hands of Musselburgh, and they'll be able to defend that for the first time next week when they take on Heriots Blues at Stony Hill. But for the time being, they can enjoy it in the clubhouse for at least another week. Brilliant win by Musselburgh, of course, against Marr. And Marr defeats at home very, very rare. So to think that they're going to lose twice at home in a week is almost unthinkable. Here's their head coach, Kenny Diffenthal.
Last weekend was a tough one. I thought we had prepared well for the weekend. Then yet again seemed to just produce little bits and pieces of what we're about. But fair play to Musselburgh, brought their A game and put us to the sword. And this week it's been all hands to pump, working hard on welcoming Heriots to Fullerton, which is, and again, seems to this every week is going to be another tough game. But hopefully the boys have taken on board what we've been working on, and we can produce a good performance on Saturday to see off Heriots, who will no doubt put us under a lot of pressure again. So let's get the second half of the season going well, hopefully.
Well, they were in a great position at the top of the table. Now they're down to second, but only 1 point adrift from Hawick. It's all about how they bounce back. Well, the Blues, of course, also need to pick themselves up because they're down to sixth now, having won only 4 of their 9 matches.
Yeah, it's we have spoke about the reaction that Hawick have had after they got defeated at Marr. Curry have yet to react to perhaps their run of form that they've been going through just now. A big game for them this weekend against Selkirk, but it's equally the same for these two sides, obviously off the back of a couple of the defeats last weekend for both sides. The most surprising one of them was Marr's. That was obviously the most surprising game in the Premiership last weekend, but you have to give a bit of respect to Musselburgh because they're scoring a lot of points and obviously able to stretch and expose teams. So Marr do need to react at home, because I've only covered a couple of games there, but again, it's one of those really intimidating rugby environments that you can't help but want to be involved in and feel a little bit of. It's a bit like Mansfield when I was growing up and playing rugby. The kind of aura around Mansfield and the way that team was and that club was, there was always a bit of kind of club jealousy. And when you go to Marr, it's almost the same. So they need to react. They need to get that fortress back, because Heriots are wanting to get in that position as well for the playoffs. It's so competitive now up towards the top of that league that this is another big game.
So let's move on to National 1 then, and the results from last week, starting with Biggar 42, GHA 40, Biggar 32-7 up, I think it was, when GHA fought back to take the lead. Biggar won it though with a last gasp penalty for their first win of the season. A blow to GHA though, but at last Biggar have got over the line.
The bottom of this league's more interesting than the top, so a blow to GHA, I don't know what for, because they're not in the promotion hunt, they're probably safe as well in terms of mid-table. They've had a patchy start, but the big news in that is Biggar's win. Biggar's first win of the season, being able to close that gap to the teams above them, and it's the first week that I think they feel they've had a stronger squad. They've really struggled with injuries over the last few weeks, and been able to bring some players back, and obviously I think they've got eyes on bringing another couple of players back into the fold and hope that they can stave off injuries for the rest of the season, because they've been below the standards that they'd expect. You can even see in their seconds team when it's kind of coming out on social media, sometimes struggling for players in terms of filling a full bench, but they got a victory. They had to do it the hard way as well. So it was almost a case of getting themselves into a position where they were more likely to lose the game than win it. But good character to come back, and I think perhaps the introduction, some of these players that are the leaders and that they rely on, perhaps showed a little bit more influence on that side this weekend.
I have to say, so because GHA aren't here to defend themselves and the old comment about them, they're currently fourth in the table on 25 points, but had they won and hung on to that win, they'd actually be in third place, only 2 points behind Highland.
Yeah, but how many points behind Ayr?
Quite a few.
Yeah, so and I think that's why I'm mentioning about the league is more interesting at the bottom, because obviously you'll talk about it in more depth, but the intrigue is at the bottom of this division, which is unlike this national one, because years gone by it's been so competitive at the top, but because Ayr are so strong and they continue to be strong, I just don't see any other team really getting into that conversation about promotion. Like I've kind of.
So you'd give the trophy to Ayr now?
Yeah,
Really?
I would quite confidently give the trophy to Ayr. I just it is premature.
10 matches to go.
But we're at the turn. We're at the turn of the league, and they've defeated everybody pretty comfortably as well. I don't know if you see another team getting into that conversation about being promoted from National 1.
It's going to be very interesting. I don't think Grant Anderson would be as confident as you.
No, I think he would be quite methodical in what he was saying. I think he would be pretty confident that come another 10 games' time, that Ayr are going to be champions of this division. I can't comment on who's going to go down. I can't predict that. Look, I'm happy to be wrong. Ayr might collapse, and this sounds ridiculous, but I just think there's not another team I see competing with Ayr this season. I just think they've got a really strong squad. They've chucked a lot at it, and they've got themselves in a good position coming up to the turn.
More on that later, but Gala 42, Dundee 32. The Maroons back to winning ways, but work to do on defence, as have Dundee, of course.
You know, it's an interesting result, because when we're talking about the intrigue at the bottom of that league, that was a big game in terms of the bottom of the league. Gala, now with that victory for Biggar, they're now still in that conversation. There's a whole host of teams at the bottom of that division. You know, Gala and Dundee being two of them, are now in a little bit of a kind of scramble in terms of trying to get a bit of distance from the bottom of that division. And, you know, Gala obviously able to pick up a big win. Dundee obviously able to accumulate a point, at least from that game. But Gala going away with the 5 points gives them a good return, because they've then got to travel away from home to Dundee later on the season. But yeah, it's a huge victory for Gala in the context of the bottom of the division.
GHK 7, Ayr 50, 8 out of 8 for Grant Anderson's team, who obviously continue to do well.
Yeah, it's just looking at stuff. You know, I'm not able to see all the games all the time. I would be divorced if I was watching all the games of rugby. But you look at the games, you look at the feedback, you look at reports. I've been up to Millbrae a couple of times as well. You see the culture, you see the news, and you see what how they carry themselves. Now, obviously, that doesn't directly translate onto the pitch all the time, but you can put two and two together and see that Ayr mean business this year. They want to get back into the Premiership. They want a really strong community club. There's a lot of work going off the pitch as well at Ayr to ensure that rugby is at the heart of that community up there. But I do not see Ayr not being promoted this season.
They are red hot favourites, there's no doubt about that. I just noticed, I mean, obviously they're playing Glasgow Hawks, which we'll come on to shortly, and they've also got to go to Highland yet as well, and that's a potential banana skin. So we'll have this conversation in 4 weeks' time, I think.
I've been wrong before.
You have, haven't
yes,
you?
And I don't know why I'm so bold with predictions, but you know, I don't want to write off the league, but you also want to have a bit of intrigue. Like, that's my interest in it. I look at it, and that's my opinion. I go, Ayr are at the top. They're in really, really good form. We talked up a lot of teams at the beginning of the season, and they've all fallen away. Ayr haven't. There's been two teams in there that have surprised us. Highland and Glasgow Hawks have got into a really good position, shown really good form, and in any other year they could perhaps be in a promotion hunt, but they have to maintain a high level of results and continuity from now until the end of the season to overturn Ayr.
And it's only really Highland and Glasgow Hawks who can get close to them. And that was the match last Saturday. Highland 29, Glasgow Hawks 14. Huge result for Highland. Hawks' great run stopped in its tracks. That is a big win for Highland.
I think looking at the result, it is a big win for Highland, because we did say last week whoever won that game is still just clinging on to Ayr. You know, they almost need pretty much like a kind of 2 or 3 game turnaround. So Ayr have to lose 2 and Highland would have to win 2 to flip it over. I don't see Ayr losing those 2 games, but again, I'm happy to be wrong. But the fact that Highland were able to restrict Glasgow Hawks to only 14 points is a really good return, because Glasgow Hawks have been scoring for fun against some sides. You know, they've got a lot of strong players in their squad, and again, just following it on social media, you can see a little bit in snippets of what their squad looks like, and you do a little bit of digging in terms of some of the players and see where they've been and what they're about, and they've got a really good side up there. So for them only be restricted to 14 points, it's a good day at the office for Highland.
Certainly is. Melrose 18, Watsonians 11 was the other match. Definitely a result that Melrose needed.
Yeah, it is a result that they needed. Coming up to the halfway point, I think obviously going on to looking at the division, you would argue that both of those sides are potentially safe, but it's a volatile league. We've seen some teams cuff one of their opposition teams one weekend, and then they've been on the receiving end of a hiding the next again. So the bottom half of this division is really, really interesting. It's probably not as intriguing as the top, but I don't want to stop anybody having a little bit of an interest in this the National 1 League. But the bottom of this division is going to be red hot come the end of the season.
What's interesting as well, let's have a look at the table now. National 1, Ayr at the top, 8 out of 8, 168 points difference, 38 points at the top. They've only dropped 2 try bonuses. Highland in second place on 32, only 4 try bonuses for them. The one game that they lost, they didn't pick up a losing bonus point there. So they're 6 points adrift. And then you go to Glasgow Hawks, a further 5 points behind them. They've won 5 out of 8, and they were absolutely destroyed by Ayr the first day of the season. But of course, that's coming up very shortly. Glasgow Hawks against Ayr this Saturday, so it'll be a different ball game, I'm sure, and could answer a few more questions. GHA in 4th on 25 points, Melrose in 5th, 22, Watsonians in 6th, 20, Gala have 18 points, they're in 7th position, Dundee 8th on 16, GHK in 9th on 13, and Biggar are now up to 12 points, a little bit healthier looking for them, that 1 win and also 4 try bonuses and 4 losing bonuses.
Yeah, I think going back to your original point about the kind of points difference, Highland have got the best defence in the league, and that could be something that will, give them a little bit of hope, put them in good stead to try and claw back Ayr, who are one of the top point scorers in the division, obviously, by their points tally. So the two teams at the top, you've got the best attack, the best defence. So, when those two teams clash, I think their fixtures are pretty back-to-back towards the end of the season. It could be that we've got 2-game shootout, and it would be brilliant if that was the case. If Highland are able to maintain this form, and we've got a period in this division where there could potentially be a 10-point turnaround at the top of the league, that could be great. But obviously the intrigue for me is at the bottom of the division, because these teams try really, really hard to be in that division, try and get into the Premiership, into that, the top of the tree, and compete against the best sides in the country. But if you get relegated, it's a difficult thing to try and get out those divisions. One team up, one team down. If one of those teams gets relegated this year, it's going to be difficult to try and get back into that one.
Well, I think also as well, looking at Ayr, the two teams they've actually struggled with so far this season was Biggar away from home when they just managed to get over the line last minute, and GHA at home just winning by a couple of points there. So they are beatable, even though they haven't been beaten yet. But I love the club. I think they deserve it. You go over the past 2 or 3 years, and Ayr deserve to be in the Premiership.
The one thing I take from that is they've been in close games, especially the bigger game, because they were trailing for a big part of that game, and then were able to come back and get the victory. And again against GHA, I see their squad is obviously a little bit weaker than it has been in the Premiership, but it's still a big game. GHA would have been up for that game, looking to try and really make a mark on a team who is perhaps going to be one of those clubs to replace them at the top table. So they've been in tight games, but they've come through them. They've come through against Gala, they've come through against Watsonians in tight battles. We've got to remember at this level of rugby as well, and this isn't a reason, but officiating isn't as consistent as it is in the top division, and when you get higher up the leagues, because the touch judges, those sort of things, those little decisions, and I just think that's where Ayr have experience, and they're a little bit more streetwise. Similar to what Melrose perhaps would have been a few years ago. They had a lot of experience in there, but now the fabric of that squad's changed, and those experienced heads like Colvin and Hutchison are having to really nurture a real young batch of players coming through now. So that's where Ayr have an advantage. There's experience, there's leadership, and there's a culture at Milbury.
Well, you like the bottom of the table of National 1, so you'll love this one. Biggar against GHK, 10th against 9th. Biggar with that monkey off the back at last, and a good chance to kick on.
Yeah, and another game where Biggar are at home, and if they do have any real burning desire to stay in this division, they need to win this game. They need to make sure that they win at home. Biggar have been almost kind of not cut adrift as such, but they've not had any luck so far this season. and they were being rooted to the bottom of the league pretty much since day dot. And then in a fortnight's time, if you can put 2 wins back to back, they could be in a position where they're 9th. And GHK are now the team who have been rattled slightly. How do they react? Are they able to put a string of results together to maintain their position in the league? So in terms of the division this weekend, I've not even glanced at where the rest of the fixtures are. That's the big one. That's the big one this weekend at Hartrees.
Well, I beg to differ, but we'll come to that one in a minute. But Gala versus Watsonians. Gala went above Dundee last week and could go above Watsonians this weekend. Here's Director of Rugby at Gala, Ewan Swinton.
Our game against Dundee last week went pretty much according to plan. It was a good win, which was highlighted by some superb scores which involved both forwards and backs. I think what we're beginning to see is the benefits of the full coaching squad being in place, and that the forwards are producing a far more structured game. They are solid in the front 5, and that's allowing the talent that we have in our back 3 to really come to the fore. People like Angus Dunn and Liam Scott are running into space and linking really well with the backs. So, good result last week. We got our 5 points. We're happy with that. The game was far from perfect. There is lots to work on, but we go forward to Watson's next weekend with lots of confidence. This is quite an exciting game for us because we didn't start off our season particularly well against them, but it was a real aberration of a game, and we're now in a completely different place. So we're expecting a good, solid performance from our forwards, and for the whole team to gel in the way that they're starting to do, showing the benefits of lots of hard work in the front row particularly, that feeding through to the whole team linking up well. Watsons are a strong opponent. We're expecting them to run the ball from everywhere, and whilst we're confident of the win, I think that it's quite reasonable to expect a 5-pointer because it may well take 4 tries or more to get the win. So really looking forward to the game against Watsons on Saturday. Looking forward to seeing talented backs like Murray Wilson get even more involved. Murray had a great game against Dundee last week, and I think we're looking for ever more from his burgeoning talent. He's a super young player, and there are lots of others around him who are coming on and really beginning to develop and come into the sort of game that we've anticipated that will be coming through. So very hopeful of a good result on Saturday to really get the second half of the season kicked off in a great fashion and take us back to somewhere near to where we hope to be for the season end.
Ewan Swinton, who's always missed a positive even when his team lose, but when Gala have won, he's literally bouncing off the walls, isn't he?
Yeah, but I think, it's great when you've got guys like that at the club because they do use a bit of positivity, where clubs are mostly run by volunteers, and it's quite easy for negativity to set in and people to be a little bit too opinionated, especially after a couple of light refreshments. Usually the opinions start flowing a little bit more, but Ewan Swinton's always a good contributor to the Gala cause and on this podcast, and that permeates through the squad as well on the side and the club. So it's obvious that he's having a good positive impact on Gala, and he's got a lot of hope in this young side as well.
Dale is salivating over Biggar against GHK. I'm salivating over Glasgow Hawks against Ayr. It's 3rd versus 1st. Here's Ayr's head coach, Grant Anderson.
Last week against GHK was probably a pleasing win from the point that we got 5 points. But for me, we were maybe a bit wasteful, especially in attack. We had done our analysis on what we thought they might bring. A good bunch of boys, young boys, keen to play. So I rotated the squad a wee bit. 1 or 2 guys returning from injury, and gave a few guys a shot, which was pleasing to see. So first half, frustratingly for us, we didn't play much rugby at all, and then our penalty count wasn't ideal, or wasn't anywhere near where I needed it to be for us to execute our game plan. So that probably let GHK into the game, who were playing with the wind at their backs. So I was frustrated with the first half, albeit we did take our chances. Anytime we entered their half, I think we've come away with points. So that was pleasing in terms of our process goals. But I spoke with the boys at half time, and we just ironed out a few kinks in our systems, and then we started to use the ball properly in the way I wanted us to. And then we started to set up a bit more of a platform with our power game, and then our fitness and kind of power eventually told, and that reflected in the scoreline. I was a bit disappointed that we didn't score more, if I'm honest. And that's not taking anything away from GHK. I just feel that the type of rugby we want to be playing, we were quite wasteful, especially in that first half. So I would have liked it if we had have increased the amount of points that we were able to score. However, I'm aware we didn't play the week before, and then that disruption week to week is good from a point of view where boys are getting a rest and a few sore bodies. A deload week, but at the same time you lose a wee bit of continuity and momentum. And then the squad that I had listed for Highland changed quite a bit. Just guys' performances in training and different things. So I'm trying to reward that anytime we're positive at training or in games. I'm giving people a chance. Looking forward to Saturday, obviously. Accies, from what I hear, Accies were a wee bit unlucky, I think, to come away with nothing from their game at the weekend against Highland. So we'll do an analysis on that. Obviously, we played them at the start of the season, but a lot has changed since then. For them, I think certainly the league's chopped and changed, and as the weather changes, people have to alter their game plan and their strategy. So we're really looking forward to the game, looking forward to going back to New Annie's Land. I've actually not been there a while myself, so I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully again we're able to execute our system and put both systems together and come away with the points that we want to take away from that game. I'm sure Granty and Jacko will have the boys fired up, and they'll be ready to go. Obviously we are sitting at the top, so I'm well aware that every other team, we've got a wee bit of a target on our back. Every other team's wanting to kind of knock us off our perch. So a set of goals and a set of targets this week, and also a challenge to our mentality, which the boys have come through every challenge so far. So I've been pleased with the level of resilience that we've shown, and the kind of determination and the desperation to avoid defeat. Is a phrase that I would use rather than winning. I think we avoided defeat at GHA, but again, that takes a certain amount of mental strength to do so. So the blend of kind of senior guys and younger guys we've got in the team, week by week, I can see them growing in confidence and resilience. So we're going on Saturday to hopefully play a high quality brand of rugby, and obviously hopefully come away with what we want to come away with.
That's Grant Anderson, master technician, doing tremendously well in charge of Ayr, who are aiming for 9 out of 9, but following Aki's loss at Highland last week, they really have to get something out of this game because they're 11 points adrift of Ayr, and of course they don't want to give them an even bigger cushion, because that could be a step too far.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm alluding to the fact the game at the bottom is a bigger game in terms of the weekend, because there is a big cushion at the top of that division. You can almost argue that Ayr can probably afford to be beaten a couple of times now. And I'm not saying they're going to go through the season unbeaten, but I think they're in a good position to be able to do that.
They could almost kill off Accies in this game.
Exactly, and I think that, yes, it is a big game in the terms of the league. It's a huge game for both sides, because, this could be the last real opportunity for Glasgow Accies to maintain get back on the horse as well, because they've defeated against another promotion rival, Highland, last weekend. This is the opportunity to beat the team at the top, bring them down, try and make that a little bit more tight at the top. If they're defeated, then they're probably out of the equation.
The 16 points that potentially could be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's just too much. We've been talking week after week about the teams that we fancied at the start of the season. Start talking about the gap and going, that's far too much. 16 points with 9 games to go against a team who's been undefeated is just far too much to overturn.
Great talking about these games, though, isn't it? Because there's so much intrigue. Brilliant,
and I think that's there's been a chasm in club rugby for a long time, and I don't think people do understand. Some people do, but the amount of work and effort that puts into promoting club rugby. I'm not going to praise you too much because it's only a narrow door there, Stuart. But obviously you do a great job, and it's something that I don't know what I would be doing in terms of my time. I would probably just be working at my usual job, and it gives me an outlet to be interested in loads of clubs across the country that I never had opportunities to be talking about or be involved in. So, it gives people a real hunger and appetite to get back involved in their clubs and be intrigued by them, and that's what this does. We've got a big game at the top of National 1 this weekend. We've got a huge game at the bottom, which is bigger than the one at the top, by the way, Stuart, but we've got a huge game at the bottom, and it's great to be chatting about it.
Absolutely, and Highland against Dundee, 2nd versus 8th, and after putting Glasgow Accies to the sword last Saturday, a win over Dundee, on paper at least, should be an easier task for them, and of course they'll be going for 5 points and hope that Accies can do them a favour against Ayr.
Yeah, you would definitely say that, and again it's a really comfortable game, I would say, for Highland. Dundee have grown week after week now, though. They've been able to score points and test teams. I just think that they really have to test Highland. They're the best defence in the league, so you would say again there it's probably a nailed on Highland win.
Melrose against GHA, Melrose in 5th, GHA in 4th. Here's Melrose head coach Ian Chisholm.
We're at the halfway mark now. Clearly we know where we hope to be at the start of the season, but it's the halfway mark now. We'll get a sit down with coaches, players, and just have a look at what we want to achieve going forward over the next couple of months. We've got a big break for 16th of December to the 20th of January. We've got the Waverley Cup in between that against Gala at the Green Yards, but we've got an opportunity just to have a wee bit of a reset, a mini pre-season, work really hard, and then go into the last few games remaining in the league, and then the Border League and into the Sevens. Last week I described the Watsons win as a close one-sided game, and looking after watching it back again, I stand by that. And had we taken, one of 12 opportunities, and those opportunities were 5 metre line outs where we lost possession, maybe the throw was inaccurate, lift was inaccurate, or we didn't execute our maul accurately. We had scrum opportunities where, against Glasgow Hawks, our scrum attack was awesome. And then we had other opportunities where we created space and we worked our way into the 22, and then we were just wasteful once we got into there. So, look, as a group, we felt that the game would have spilled open for us if we'd taken one of those opportunities. But rugby happens sometimes, and if a team are still in it come the last 10 minutes, then they give themselves a chance. Every time they defend a 5 metre maul, it gives them a lift. Every time they win a defensive set that's on their 5 metre line, that's within their 5 metre line on the try line, they get a wee lift for that, and it just keeps them in the game a wee bit more. But if we think back to the Accies game, we shipped 62 points, and we had a real focus around our defence and what went wrong, and whether with individual or system errors, and who needs to get better at what, so that we can help the players kick on in there. And we were really happy with our defensive display. There was wee bits and bobs and there's always going to be, but we were back to looking more like ourselves. That was definitely helped by the work that Finlay Sinclair put on, and Dylan Coburn made 16 tackles, and Connor Spence was just really good at getting into that space, working hard, and trying to limit the attack to play in small areas of the pitch. Come this Saturday, the Storm are facing Kelso Sharks at 1 p.m. on the Green Yards, and followed by the first team against GHA. So it is an exciting day for Melrose Rugby Club members. There's plenty of rugby for them to be getting on, and if we turn our attention to GHA, they'll be sore after losing to Biggar with the last kick of the game. But look, I don't think it'll knock their confidence. If I think back to the game at Braidham, we allowed that game to go. It was a high stoppage game. We allowed it to go set piece to set piece, and for there, it let GHA exert their dominance on our young pack at scrum time and maul. Look, we were keen to move them about, play at pace, and we always create plenty of opportunities. We're one of these teams, and I do look at other teams, and they're pretty reliant on skill errors and penalties to gain territory or gain access to opposition's 22s, and we do plenty to create opportunities, to create space. We use the ball to beat defences, and look, I'm really happy that we are creating opportunities. But what I'd like to see this weekend, we just need to add a wee bit of killer instinct and look after the ball a wee bit better. And if we could see those opportunities turn into points, we're going to give ourselves an opportunity to really kick on in this last half of the season. This weekend we've got a number of players back in contention for selection. We do have a few missing. Will Owen, he is away this weekend, and Sandy Fairbairn, he hyperextended his knee and has a wee bit of a meniscus tear on pretty early doors in the Watsons game, and that allowed Ben McLean to get his opportunity to play, and however Sandy's been playing really well, and so the boys that we welcome back, Ben Weir, he's been an emergency loan cover with the Knights. Ben's a boy that's still eligible for Scotland under 20s, and we want to help him get there. We thought that Knights is a good platform to just put him in the shop window a wee bit more there, and look, he has been long-term injured, and he's been coming back from that, but look, we're really chuffed with how he's been tracking there. Ben's brother Hamish is back involved again. He's a busy man. He's been doing a lot. He's been at the World Cup a lot, and look, we're absolutely delighted to have him back. He's a bit of a catalyst for us. If teams kick to him, look, he's absolutely going to have a go, and he's not scared to have a go. He always backs himself, and that's what we love about him, and we're delighted to have him back in the mix. Hamish Derrick will come back into the squad as hooker cover. Hamish played loosehead prop up at GHA the first time round, and look, Hamish is awesome in the loose, and he's just a young lad. He's 18-year-old, and he's getting better and better all the time. But where Hamish really puts himself forward is his versatility, because not only can he play in the front, right across the front row, he could probably play in the back row as well. And we welcome back Craig Fairbairn, who dropped out the squad on Saturday morning last weekend through a bug and illness. And look, he probably felt he could have played, but there's always a risk that other boys get ill and we suffer from availability. But look, really happy to have Craig back this weekend, and He's a big player for us. He's a really physical player. He gets us going forward. Against Glasgow Hawks, he had a massive tackle count. And look, we're looking for the same sort of thing this weekend from him.
Melrose against GHA then. Melrose 5th and GHA in 4th place. Very similar, in fact. They've both won 4 games. Similar points difference. GHA, though, with 3 more bonus points. But Melrose have the home advantage, so this could go anyway.
Yeah, and I just think the form that Melrose have shown over the last few weeks, it's quite unpredictable. You know, it's difficult to try and analyse what this result's going to be. But it's been the same for GHA, and I think that, you know, that's probably been a little bit of the narrative of National 1 this season, that the teams probably below the top 3 teams have not really been that consistent. You could almost argue for Glasgow Hawks there as well, because they have lost 3 games, but they're still in the conversation for promotion, but just outside bets. But yeah, it's just difficult to predict. But you've got to love the insight from Ian Chisholm. You know, the depth that he talks about the game is really insightful. It's open, it's transparent, and I think that players buy into that. Like, even talking about the end about Hamish Derrick and explaining about his strengths, and also making it real and saying that, look, he's a young player but he's always improving. I think that's exactly what these young players need. They need truths. They need to be told it as it is. They don't need to be kind of mollycoddled and told they're world beaters when, you know, most weekends they kind of roll over and get their belly tickled. So, you know, it's good. I really like that about Ian Chisholm. I think his approach to coaching teams and dealing with teams, from what I remember at Peebles as well and hearing feedback, is refreshing, and I think he'll definitely go far. But it's a big game this weekend for those two sides, because Melrose, it's very rare for them to be at home and question whether they're favourites or not, and I think that's one of those weekends.
Let's move into National 2 then, and last weekend's results. Aberdeen Grammar 5, Gordonian 17. Aberdeen derby there went the way of Gordonian, so bragging rights in Aberdeen for them. And well, you couldn't have said that a few years ago when Grammar were in the Premiership.
No, and I think, you know, it's one of those things that over the last few years, they've really suffered, and I don't know why. They've plummeted like a stone, because they were in the Prem a few years ago, as you say, and year after year they're starting to fall.
We've seen this with other clubs as well. I mean, West of Scotland, Livingston now in the East Leagues, teams that were so high profile and have just kind of not just one relegation, it's 2 relegations, sometimes 3.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time there can be an argument for that in terms of the appetite of rugby, and changes in landscapes as well. But Edinburgh as a place is really difficult to compete in. You know, you've got Heriots, you've got Boroughmuir, you've got these big Watsonians, you've got these big clubs that just have a little bit of prestige behind them, so players are naturally want to go there. So sometimes by proxy they get the best players. Sometimes a lot of money gets flooded into a club. Now, I can say that about Biggar, for example. You know, they benefited from a lot of money being in their club, paying a lot of players years gone by. That is obviously not the case now. You can see that because Biggar are at the foot of National 1. Livingston, it might have been the same, I don't know. But Last Wade obviously benefited over a while by a cash injection.
Falkirk as well, most memorably. I mean, most of their squad actually disappeared once the club decided, look, we don't pay anymore.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that's what club rugby used to be about. That people used to go and get a good bit of money. I can't name the team. I'm not going to tell you it was Peebles. But they, you know, I remember back when they were in the Premiership, they were going through a hellish run of form, and I was young, so I was playing youth rugby at the time, and the stories when you start coming through the club and they go, I remember back when we were in the Premiership, we lost 7 games on the bounce, and all of a sudden somebody came in and said, you'll get X amount as a win bonus, and they went on an unbeaten run until the end of the season. And you know, that's the sort of thing that happened in club rugby. It just isn't happening now, because of changes and obviously the way that it's restricted to pay players and what have you.
And to put the record straight, I think Premiership they still pay.
Yeah. So there's obviously the kind of performance criteria that you're not allowed to pay below the Premiership unless they're player coaches or something like that, which some teams are able to do and benefit from. But there's not a lot of money in rugby, in club rugby at the moment, and people do it now for the love of the game. And some players do get paid, and you know, that's just part and parcel of clubs, and you just have to try and do it in a transparent nature. But yeah, obviously Aberdeen Grammar, they were a club years ago that when they were in the Premiership they did attract players and paid them, and they had a bit of money, and now they don't. And obviously the students that are going there are just not able to, you know, fit the bill and provide that amount of quality to their club. So, you know, it's obviously it's desperate times at Grammar, but we don't like seeing that as well. We're not seeing it through any kind of joy, but there's something going on there that is the wider picture, because it has been a kind of narrative for a few years. Caledonia region in club rugby is starved, and there's not a lot of players there. It might be geography which drives that. it might be the resources, it might be the concentration from the Scottish Rugby to that region to try and grow it. But there's a few things that will be mapping that out. It's just unfortunate that Aberdeen are one of the teams that are suffering really, really badly at the moment from that.
I remember the days when, in fact, remember the picture. The Border League was sponsored by, I think, Bank of Scotland, £50,000.
Exactly.
I mean, now, even the Scottish Cup, there's no prize money. It actually costs a club to travel to play a match.
I know, and clubs have to work harder. It's so difficult because I've always said about rugby clubs, like I've learnt some of the best lessons in life at a rugby club, and some have been really tough. And some of you have to look yourself in the mirror and you have to then, question what your responsibilities are or how you act, and you're always surrounded by them and you always go back to a rugby club, and I've always been welcomed back through success or failure to rugby clubs. And that's not just the club I played for, it's clubs all around the country. I've been welcomed into every single rugby club you walk into. They're brilliant. They're the best parts of the community. They're different to any other club, I think, because they bring so much more than just going and playing sport. So it's always difficult when money goes out the game, because clubs have to think differently in terms of how they keep washing kit, how do they keep paying for buses, how do they keep providing juice and crisps for the youth rugby when they come into the rugby club. It's a business and it's difficult. If there's not money there, sometimes they go to the wall, but some clubs are doing brilliantly. We talk about Ayr, Peebles Marr Rugby Club at the is got a really good culture there now, a really good community, which I kind of think I wish I was kind of not injured all the time. But it's challenging times in club rugby, so it's great that we're able to cover so much of it and see the successes and failures that are going on at the moment. But obviously Aberdeen at the moment are going through a bit of a difficult time.
Oh, we're certainly digressing a little bit. I think 10 minutes ago we started talking about Aberdeen Grammar 5, Gordonian 17. That's a good thing about the podcast, it's open-ended. If we want to stop and have a chat about something, then we will. Hope you're enjoying it anyway. Berwick 15, Peebles 35. Now perhaps Berwick's most disappointing result this season so far, fair to say, particularly because they were at home. But a 5-pointer for Peebles will have certainly delighted them and their staff, and obviously they're fighting for promotion.
Yeah, I think that, it was a big result for Peebles. They're needing to stay in that hunt, and after a disappointing defeat away to Newton Stewart a few weeks ago, this was a difficult game, I think, for Peebles. And some of their players, obviously for watching the game, some of their players really stood up. I think Cammy Pye is a player that has promised a lot over the years. He was a really promising youth, and perhaps just wasn't in the position at that time to really apply himself to rugby all the time, like some players are able to. But he's back at the club. He's working hard in his employment just now. He's an electrician and doing well at that. But I just see a different nature in him, and I think that showed on the park. It was really nice to see. In defence, he was formidable. Like in an attack, he was dangerous. It took a lot of players to bring him down, but some of those more experienced heads as well. Donald Anderson kicked 10 points. 15-25 is a different scoreline if he's not able to get those kicks. But some of those players as well playing out of position. Davy Collins at fullback's a really good rugby player, but able to just show that at national too, if you're a good rugby player, you will stand out. And a good win on the road for Peebles, but again a difficult afternoon for Berwick, and you're starting to think more and more about these big games coming up for the Scremerston guys.
Beveridge Park, we almost saw a shock. Kirkcaldy 28, Falkirk 31. I think Kirkcaldy were in the lead for some of that game, but it's a win for Falkirk, less comfortable than they would have expected, but a win nevertheless. And maybe Kirkcaldy starting to turn the corner a bit by running Falkirk close.
Yeah, I think, looking at that result, it was almost one when it was coming through in social media as well that I had almost kind of written off Falkirk and put it down as a Kirkcaldy shock win. So, obviously a good bit of character from Falkirk to get back into that game and obviously escape with the victory, because it certainly does keep them in touch at the top of the division, and it would have been a big defeat for Falkirk and a big blow to them if they were to suffer a defeat against Kirkcaldy. But it just shows you what this division can do. I think that was perhaps the story of the season for Peebles last year. They were losing those games against teams towards the foot of the table, where Falkirk almost kind of fell foul of that there as well, but able to escape with the victory. So obviously it keeps a bit of pressure on the top, but Kirkcaldy slowly starting to grow. Obviously not bet against them, picking up a few important victories on the way to the close of the season.
Lasswade 43, Stirling County 24 on Saturday. Good solid win for Lasswade there at the top of the table against mid-table County, and Peter Wright's got them delivering good performances most weeks.
Yeah, obviously that bump in the road against Gordonians, but Lasswade again got a real firm grip in the top spot in that division. Obviously there's been some games called off and it'll start to get a little bit tighter, but Obviously I think there's almost that more intrigue now at the top of this division than what we've seen in National 1 over the last few years, because there's a lot of teams in there that can still have a big say in terms of who's going to be promoted. You can almost cut this division in half. I think that the top half can all perhaps hold their hand up and kind of vie for promotion, where at the bottom half of the table there's still a relegation battle on for most of those sides as well.
Yes, we'll have a look at the league table in a second, but there is that north-south divide, there's no doubt about it. The other game last Saturday, Newton Stewart 38, Stewmel 25. After losing their first two games, Newton Stewart haven't lost since. And let's not forget, their losses were actually against the two top teams, Falkirk and Lasswade. Stewmel, well, they put up a good fight on the road, but came away from Bladnoch with nothing at all and stayed bottom because of their 3-point deduction.
Yeah, obviously that's been a big blow to Stewart's Melville in terms of their season. But again, it's a good victory for Newton Stewart. They were really well drilled against Peebles in that game that I saw. I think that's perhaps been that confidence boost that side's needed, because they were in really good form last year. Probably started off the season a little bit flatter, and I certainly wrote them off far too soon, because I thought that perhaps they'd maybe seen a bit of an exodus of some of their important players. But they've went on a really good run of form after that, and obviously another important victory, a tight victory, but an important victory against Stewart's Melville means that they can keep in touch at the top.
So the top 5 all winning, the bottom 5 all losing in National 2. Lasswade at the top with 35 points, but they've played one more game than most of the other teams. Falkirk in second on 31, Peebles in third, 27, Gordonians fourth, 25, Newton Stewart fifth, 23, and then we find this divide at the bottom 5. Stirling County in 6th place on 16, Kirkcaldy in 7th, 13, Berwick with 8, Aberdeen Grammar with 8, and Stewart's Melville, who were docked 3 points, are down at the bottom on 7 points. Well, let's have a look at this week's fixtures. Falkirk against Lasswade, the big two clashing. Both only lost one game this season. Lasswade at home to Gordonians, and Falkirk lost at home to Peebles.
Yeah, this is a huge game. Obviously Falkirk in second and Lasswade top of the pile. This could be one of those games that it's either going to make things a lot more interesting at the top of the table and show that Lasswade are perhaps vulnerable as well, or it could be the one that takes the wind out of Falkirk's sails, because they've had a few tight games. They've had games that they've come out the other side in narrow victories, especially the most recent one against Kirkcaldy. But at their home patch, they'll be confident that they'll be able to get the victory. But we've got to bear in mind that some of those teams, such as Peebles, have went to their home patch and they've defeated Falkirk. So obviously this is an interesting game, but it's almost a must-win for Falkirk.
Gordonians versus Berwick, another long trip to Aberdeen for Berwick, but at least they've got those trips out of the way before the snow and ice comes later in the season. Berwick still without a win, Gordonians pushing for promotion in their first year up. Let's listen to what Berwick forwards coach Paul Pringle has to say.
So last Saturday we welcomed Peebles down to Skemerston, what we knew was going to be a tough affair. Games over the past have been really, really tight between us, and we know that they're a big pack and that they bring that intensity. So we knew it was going to be a tough game. Unfortunately, just probably too many critical errors for us at key moments in the match. Probably not capitalising on large periods of possession that we had. All resulted in a 35-15 loss. Just a really tough one for us, I think, to take. A lot of the stuff we'd worked on in the weeks leading up to it, we didn't take into the match. We had a chat this week at training, we're addressing that, and just really, it's just one of those games now that we just want to put behind us and move forward. Certainly when you're sitting in the lower half of the league, you don't really have time to dwell on these games. You just have to put them at the back of your mind and move on to the next one. So this week we're on the road. We're up to Aberdeen again for the second time this season to meet Gordonians. We probably don't know a huge amount about them, having the fact that they've just come up, but we know they've started pretty well, so we're fully expecting this will be a tough game. We've got a largely unchanged squad, so that's good. That gives us a bit of a settled routine there. Give a chance of our back three to gel a little. The forward pack's been pretty consistent. So really we're just stressing the guys, trust in our processes, make sure that we we don't go into that panic mode if we don't score, within 2-3 phases, or we don't have to do anything out of the ordinary. Lineouts last week, I think we won 13 and lost 1. But then we stopped using them in attacking positions just because we had lost that one. So we really just tried to kind of reiterate that with the guys, that we have these processes in place and really just trust in them, and the results will come. So look, we're fully expecting it's going to be a hard game. It's just a case of, we need to go up there and really put a performance together, and it's an 80-minute performance is what we're stressing. I think we've had, individual performances, some of the stats that we're seeing out from guys like Ryan Wilson, and certainly Nathan Melrose last week, these guys are putting in phenomenal shifts. What we need though is we need 15 players putting those shifts in on the same day. And also, a strong enough bench who are going to come on and make an impact in the game. So look, we're looking forward to Saturday. It's a long trip, we'll do an early start, but we're going up there with the expectation of, really wanting to put a performance in it and get that W. So bring on Saturday.
There'll be some journey back if they manage to get some points on the road at Gordonians. Only losses for Gordonians were at home to Falkirk and away at Peebles. Berwick still without that win.
Well, I did see a lot about Berwick that was pretty good at the weekend. They started really well, really steady, really tested Peebles because defensively Peebles are pretty strong, but they were making good inroads and the patience was there. But just I think that Peebles were perhaps just able to play in the right areas a little bit more. So Berwick need to learn from that and then go on the road and try and, really stick to their brand of rugby. They've got a lot of good talented rugby players in that squad, but obviously just finding things a little bit difficult just now. And bearing in mind, this is their second year in this kind of level. I know obviously things kind of mapped out differently after the summer, but it's obviously their second year playing more top level opposition, and they're still doing really well. But it's a difficult game against a Gordonian side who are in a bit of form at the moment.
Peebles will be playing Kirkcaldy, 3rd against 7th. The thoughts of Peebles head coach Graham Patterson.
Really pleased to get back on the field for the guys last Saturday at Scremerston against Berwick. Really important to get a good positive bounce back after having 2 weeks off. That was really the emphasis that we put onto the guys is getting back into the swing of things as quickly as possible, and it was a really positive first half for us. Initially, defence was to the fore. Berwick came at us first sort of 5-6 minutes of that game and really tested our defence, and for me it was seeing the positive outcomes in terms of no line breaks, no missed tackles, no allowing them entries into the 22, and it was a testament to their skill set, their determination, their work rate, their communication, the ability to fill the field and really deny Berwick an easy opportunity to hit deep into our 22. They did get one penalty sort of after about 6 or 7 minutes, but really that was all they had to show for that, and our attitude really was set by that first sort of 5-6 minutes defensively throughout the game. After that we turned round defence into attack and really looked organised, sharp and decisive, and really quite effective in terms of entries into 22. We ended up with 4 tries in total in that first half, and there were different types of tries, close in pick and go drives. There was some wide-to-wide stuff and some real good skill execution in terms of getting that ball to the space. Pleasing to see some of the stuff that we worked on during training coming up in parts of those tries, scoring opportunities, and played really well. But we knew turning around at half-time that the conditions, the wind, the slope on the pitch, it was going to be a different sort of matter in the second half, and it turned out a wee bit to be that. It turned a wee bit scrappier, but I think that was because we were just so resilient in terms of our defence. I always felt that we were in control of the game. Defensively, we just limited them to one real opportunity in that second half, which they got a try from, and we scored one ourselves. So overall, it was a really all-round pleasing performance. Yes, you could wish for more, but I think really performance-wise, that was a real step forward for us after having had those 2 defeats in our last 2 games. In terms of personnel, James Dow was absolutely outstanding at 13, both in attack and defence. Davy Collins, having been off for such a long time of this season with an injury, came back briefly before that enforced break, but he's now starting to really show his sharpness and stamping his authority on those attacking opportunities out wide. And once again, Cammy Pye was absolutely tireless, both in both sides of the ball, carrying, and also some of the hits he put in defensively was really impressive. But overall, a team performance. There was nobody that let the side down at all. So looking ahead to Kirkcaldy, we're approaching this in pretty much the same way. With Berwick, probably a similar type of team makeup, similar positions in terms of the league. They had a really close game against Falkirk last week, so it's very much about don't look at the position of the opposition in the league. Go out there with the mindset that you're going to have to perform in order to get the result. So that's how we're approaching that game. So our broad game plan will be the same, but again, we'll look to just make a couple of little adjustments and additions to our play that will maybe keep the opportunities coming for us, both in attack and defence, and how we approach that. It was a winning side, so therefore selection becomes on paper a bit easier in terms of not having to look at bringing people in to solve problems. You're more about looking to see who is performing well that maybe gets an opportunity to break into that, but they're going to be few and far between when you have a winning side. Having said that, there will be one change with Ross Wolfenden having got over his shoulder knock. He will be brought into the squad for Saturday, making his senior debut for the club, which is, again, as we spoke about previously, exciting for him, exciting for us, and looking to integrate him smoothly into that team environment in the senior game. And hopefully that will assist in his development as an individual and impact on us as a team as well. But apart from that, there's going to be no real changes to our makeup. There might be one positional change within the squad, but that's about it. It's looking to go out there with confidence, but not overconfidence, and making sure that we put in that performance against Kirkcaldy at home and making that 5 points and keeping the momentum going and keeping on the tails of both Falkirk and Lasswade, who are playing each other this week, so something has to give there. So hopefully we'll make inroads in at least one of those teams, if not two. Hopefully for us, we looked at that and thought possibly the best result out of that is a low-scoring draw, and we can maybe pick up some points on both the teams in one game, but we'll wait and see if that happens or not.
Graham Patterson, head coach of Peebles, he's kind of said it all, hasn't he?
Yeah, I know Graham quite well, so he's a really intelligent rugby coach, really good rugby guy, and it's I think Peebles are obviously benefiting from him being at the club. He's obviously feeding off of a lot of good work that Ian Chisholm done last year, but I think Graham Patterson's outlook in terms of the experience that he's had is a little bit different. He's obviously speaking about Ross Wolfenden there, and obviously praising a lot of players who played well on Saturday before, so not a lot of changes to the squad this weekend for Peebles, but I think the introduction of Ross Wolfenden will be a good one. It'll be difficult, it'll be different to what he's used to, because he's used to being in a very, very successful youth team at Peebles. It's difficult when you go up to adult rugby. You're not expected to win every weekend, and that'll be one of the adjustments and the expectations that will have to be managed by the coaching staff and the players with Ross. But certainly he's a player to keep an eye out for, a really talented rugby player.
And a word for Kirkcaldy, if they can kick on from their Falkirk result, which it wasn't a winning one, but it was a much better performance, then they could start climbing. Yeah,
I think that they've certainly shown signs of improvement. I think you look at teams like Dundee in the league above as well, like they've had some really difficult games and been on the end of some heavy defeats, but they've started to slowly grow. They've just been one of those slow burners to this league, and it's a difficult game for Peebles. Historically, Peebles have not really played that well against Kirkcaldy. They've been two teams that have come across each other in the division quite a lot, and they've been one of those teams that have sometimes upset Peebles when they've been on a good run of form, and likewise Peebles have done it to Kirkcaldy. So it's one of those games that's got a bit of history to it as well. So it'll be an interesting game at the Guides.
Blue and white stripes against red and white stripes in that game at the Guides. Stewmel against Aberdeen Grammar, and I know you like a bottom of the table clash. 10th against 9th. Stewmel head coach is Alex Haggart.
Saturday against Newton Stewart, we did some really, really good stuff actually. We were spot on. I actually put Newton Stewart under a wee bit of pressure. They're a great club, they're a great side as well. Love playing down there. I thought we played some really good rugby actually for about 50-60 minutes. They scored a try just before half-time and a try straight after half-time. And those two bookended tries kind of killed our momentum a wee bit. But going into the last 10 minutes, we were still only 8 points behind. So it was disappointing to not come away with anything. Like a try bonus would have been really good. A losing bonus point would have been really good. Just something. So it was a bit disappointing for all the effort that we went to not come back with anything. But, we actually did some really good stuff. Newton Stewart would tell you that they were in a really physical game, which was quite nice. Which is maybe not something that Stuart Melville's been famous for. So that was pleasing. This week, looking forward into Aberdeen Grammar. We got a huge couple of weeks coming up for the club, playing Grammar, playing Berwick next week as well. It's a huge couple of weeks. The boys know that and they're really excited. So we've got a few guys returning. We've got Jamie Sword coming back in to the second row after being away. We've got Steve Spowert coming back into the front row, which will be a huge boost for us. Morgan Thompson's coming back into the front row for us as well. So we're really fortunate in the sense that we've got these guys dropping back in at just the right time. So I'm quite pleased about that. I think Charlie Burrows will start for us at 9, and he's a really good player for us, has a bit of presence, has a bit of leadership and some really good skills as well. So that's a positive for me. The boys are under absolutely no illusion about the task ahead of them, about playing Grammar. We know what's coming at us. We watched their game against Gordonians. They run tight off the breakdown. They're big, they're abrasive. They know what they are and they're very, very good at doing that. So for us, it's about fronting up physically and making sure that we don't play rugby in our half. And when we get the ball, we're clinical and we move them about a wee bit. And that has to be the idea. So, yeah, just really looking forward to it. It's my old club, so it'll be nice seeing a few people again. Yeah, just trying our absolute hardest to pick up a result.
Alex Haggart, and of course they'll both be targeting this one. Stewmel with home advantage might be a bit too strong for Grammar at Inverleith. What's your own thoughts?
I think it's an intriguing one. I think it's one of those ones that's I just can't call it. Both sides have shown signs of improvement throughout the season, but then they've shown signs of being really, really poor. Stuart Melville, I've seen them at home against Peebles, and for 40 minutes I thought they were really, really poor. But then the last 30 minutes of that game, they really looked pretty good. And I thought they tested Peebles, who are one of the best sides in the division. So, obviously they can do it. It's just been consistent. They've thrown away games that they've perhaps, that famous Alex Haggart quote, they've thrown away games that they perhaps could have won. But, it's, Aberdeen have been able to pick up a narrow victory against one of their rivals as well. But they were able to beat Berwick, who did have to travel up to Aberdeen. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either way this weekend if Aberdeen were to sneak a victory or if Stuart Mel were to get the victory at home. I think it's just one of those games, but again it just has so many implications in terms of the bottom of this division.
And that's one of the joys of doing the live radio programme, because we see these results coming in, these scorelines coming in, and sometimes they prove very surprising.
Yeah, and especially, we've seen National 1, we've seen some results 60 points to 12 or 14, and it's been a bit of a bolt for the Blue. So, this is one of those games that is just going to be an absolute dogfight for both of these sides. Stuart Melville, I think the introduction of Jamie Sword is a huge asset for them. He played really well in the district stuff against South of Scotland when it was at Netherdale. I thought he was a really impressive player. He was a big ball carrier for them against Peebles as well. So him coming back into the side will be a huge asset for Stuart Melville.
The other match, Stirling County against Newton Stewart. Just 3 wins out of 8 for Stirling this season, in 6th place, against Newton Stewart in 5th. But of course, Newton Stewart have won their last 5 games. Yeah,
Newton Stewart are on a bit of form now. They've started the season pretty slow, but are starting to really get their knees up and stride on now in this division. So they're going to be one of those teams that, yes, if they don't get promoted, they're going to have a huge say in terms of who gets promoted, because going away to Newton Stewart's a difficult place, but obviously away from home as well, they're performing a lot better.
On to National 3 then. Alan Glenn's 22, Preston Lodge 25 last week. A big game for both of them, of course. Preston Lodge taking Alan Glenn's unbeaten record there.
Yeah, and it was a penalty in the last minute to get the victory as well. So obviously it was nip and tuck there at Alan Glenn's, but that's a huge victory for Preston Lodge, who are on a complete rich vein of form at the moment. You know, obviously picking up some sizable victories, but obviously a huge important victory on the road against Alan Glen. So, you know, if you've not checked it out yet, I think the social media post that PL put up in terms of that last minute penalty was good watching, and they obviously enjoyed it as well. They wanted it hung in a very famous art gallery somewhere.
Cartha Queen's Park, 51, West of Scotland 41, or 54-41, depending on who you believe, because Cartha posted 51-41 on their social media, while the SAU have Cartha scoring 3 more points. You would think that Cartha would go for the 3 extra points, but no, they insist it's 51-41. But regardless of the finer details, that's a good win for CQP, and only their second of the season, which takes them off the bottom.
Yeah, and obviously we did say last weekend it was going to be a big game at Cartha. A high scoring encounter. Just shows that both sides obviously are quite leaky in defence, so a lot of attacking opportunities, but it takes them off the bottom, which I'm sure at the beginning of the weekend they would have been absolutely delighted with.
Dumfries 17, Orkney 33. Orkney still unbeaten.
Yeah, Orkney are impressive to be able to commit to the travel and pick up some really good important victories. It's brilliant to see. You know, imagine them going up to National 2. Imagine them climbing. And we've talked about it before, actually, on this podcast, about the money that clubs have to put in to travel. Now, Orkney are no different, but for them to be able to contribute and commit to travelling to the mainland clubs is phenomenal. And to escape with so many victories as well is a testament to their club.
Hamilton 26, Boroughmuir 47, and the other match was Howe 5 38, Hillhead Jordan Hill 12. Howe 5 still in fourth, but Hillhead Jordan Hill beginning to lose ground now.
Yeah, a few games there perhaps in the middle of the table, but one of them involving Hamilton, who are now the team that are placed at the bottom of the division. Disappointing for them again to suffer a defeat, picking up a lot of bonus points, but yet to pick up a victory of any sorts. But the bonus points, it means that they are still quite close to the teams above them. You know, one victory could change things for them, but you know, obviously another defeat for them, another defeat at home, and Boroughmuir get a sizable victory.
And as you mentioned, that means Hamilton goes down to the bottom of the table. Cartha Queen's Park jumping over them because of that victory. But Preston Lodge at the top, 35 points, won 7 of their 8 games. Orkney in second on 32. Alan Glen suffering that first defeat. They dropped to third. They've got 30 points. Howe Fife in fourth on 28. Hillhead Jordan Hill in fifth, 23. Boroughmuir in 6th, 22, and then a big drop. West of Scotland in 7th, 10 points lower on 12. Dumfries also on 12 in 8th. Cartha Queen's Park also on 12 in 9th. Bit of a scrap there at the bottom. And Hamilton, just the 9 points, still no wins out of their 8 games in 10th place.
Yeah, the division itself is really, really interesting. You know, we talked about Hamilton there in terms of not winning yet. But they're only 3 points behind Cartha Queen's Park at the bottom, and obviously Dumfries are in that conversation as well. West of Scotland on 12, so you know it's a battle. It's those 4 teams at the bottom of that division, and it's certainly going to be an interesting second half of the season when it comes around. Obviously, still got another round of fixtures before we reach that point for most of the clubs in National 3, but there's going to be a lot of big battles at the bottom of that league.
This week, though, nothing really tight. We've got Boroughmuir against Alan Glen, 6th against 3rd there. Hillhead Jordan Hill against Hamilton, 5th against 10th. Orkney, a home tie against Cartha Queen's Park, 2nd against 9th there. Preston Lodge against Dumfries, 1st against 8th. And West of Scotland, 7th place at the moment against Howe 5 4th. So all those 5 games should go the way of the phone book.
Yeah, it should pretty much be Alan Glen's, Hillhead, Orkney, PL and Howe Fife if you're looking at the way that the fixtures are lying out. Probably the most difficult one to call there might be the West of Scotland Howe Fife game. Obviously a little bit closer in terms of the table, but you know most of the other teams are involved in that little battle at the bottom. But you've got to say that there's a lot of interesting games in there, big games in there. But you would say obviously Orkney and PL, they're playing Cartha and Dumfries. They're 2 teams at the top of the division playing 2 of the teams towards the foot. So you've got to go with form, and you've got to say that certainly it's one of those weekends where you can quite confidently say that's the way that the results are going to go. But as we've figured out before, I am seldom right.
Well, finally we get to National 4. Thank you for waiting. Of course, if you are listening to the Scottish Club Rugby podcast as a regular, you know that we do have chapter points so you can jump to whichever division you're particularly interested in, although we do like you to listen to it all if you want to. National 4 then, last week's results: Garnock 95, Perthshire 14, Greenock Wanderers 32, Dunfermline 24, North Berwick 36, Murrayfield Wanderers 14, and Stewartry 32, Whitecraigs 36. Whitecraigs in second place and still in contention. The match between Strathmore and Ross High, by the way, was the only postponed game last week in the National Leagues. And the league table for National 4, Garnock at the top, unbeaten, 100% record, 233 points difference total, 7 try bonuses in their first season in National Rugby. So well done to them. 35 points at the top. They look in an unassailable lead. However, Whitecraigs are in second. They've won 5 of their 7. They have 29 points. Strathmore in third, 22. Dunfermline fourth, 21. Stewartry fifth, 19. North Berwick sixth, 19. Murrayfield Wanderers are in 7th position on 17. Greenock Wanderers in 8th with 14. And Perthshire and Ross High both have 9 points at the bottom of the table, both having won just the one match. Perthshire in 9th and Ross High in 10th. So really it's a two-horse race, isn't it? It's Garnock against Whitecraigs. However, Strathmore and Dunfermline below them do have a game in hand.
Yeah, obviously a victory for Strathmore takes them a little bit closer, and yeah, I certainly wouldn't be writing those two teams off just now. But Garnock have had a remarkable start to the season. To 7 from 7 with 7 try bonuses is obviously you don't get much better than that at all. So a great start for them in that division. But still a lot of rugby to be played. Obviously they've had those fixtures, those good fixtures for them at home, or a lot of challenges still to come on the horizon for all those sides in that division. But certainly Garnock, Whitecraigs and then Strathmore and Dunfermline are still in the hunt for promotion. The
most difficult game for Garnock, I think, winning away at Whitecraigs by 32 points to 26, and now they have to welcome them back to Garnock later on in the season. So this week in National 4, a little bit closer in fact. Dunfermline against Garnock, 4th against 1st. Murrayfield Wanderers versus Stewartry, that's 7th versus 5th. Perthshire against North Berwick, 9th against 6th. Ross High against Greenock Wanderers, 10th versus 8th. And, the big one stands out a mile. Whitecraigs against Strathmore, 2nd v 3rd, and Strathmore, as I mentioned earlier, have a game in hand.
Yeah, obviously Strathmore have that game in hand against Ross High, so it's obviously pretty much, you would say, a nailed-on victory, because Ross High are at the foot of the table, and Strathmore are desperate for points to keep in touch at the top, so they've obviously got that to look forward to. But this weekend, really interesting games as well. A difficult game, we were just speaking about there in terms of difficult games on the horizon. So Garnock away from home against Dunfermline is probably the one that catches the eye there, and obviously Whitecraigs and Strathmore. So the top 4 teams all colliding this weekend, which makes it an intriguing weekend in National 4.
Well, we finally reached the end. That's it for today on the Scottish Club Rugby Podcast. Don't forget, Rugby Radio this Saturday will be coming from Balgray in Glasgow with live commentary of Glasgow Hawks against Hawick at the earlier time of 1:30. And from this week until the clocks go forward next year, we'll be on air for 3.5 hours instead of 2.5. We'll also be having second half commentary of the 3 o'clock kickoff between Kelso and Musselburgh in the Premiership, as well as all the score updates throughout the afternoon. There'll be television highlights on Borders Rugby TV of Glasgow Hawks against Hawick. That's on Sunday. And check out our website at rugbyradio.co.uk for all the information you need on the 50 clubs playing national rugby in Scotland this season. If you want to get in touch, as usual, it's podcast at bordersrugby.net. But from Dale Clancy and myself, bye for now.